You're listening to episode 1004 of the Father Bills Podcast. Welcome back. This week's episode is being offered by Father Dominic Sternhagen in his homilies entitled Darkness and Light, given on the first Sunday in Advent 2025.
In ancient times, our ancestors were very dependent on the cycles of the year and on the times and seasons. And every year has its good times and its bad times. And if you lived in the north of Europe, you would watch the days get shorter and shorter. The nights get longer and longer, and it would get colder and colder, and everything would seem to die. And you'd naturally wonder, is this the year when it's just going to keep colder and colder? Is this the year when the sun is just going to sink all the way away, in which we'll all die in icy darkness? And so the astrologers and the magicians would very carefully watch the sun and the stars until there came a moment when it stopped getting darker. There came a moment when the sun stopped receding and when the light started to return. And that was always the great celebration of light. Why do we celebrate Christmas at this time? And why is Christmas such a celebration of light at the darkest moment of the year? If you look around, everything to do with Christmas has to do with light. All these candles and lit up trees and blow up reindeer and snowmen and Mrs. Claus and I don't know what else, but there's all these things that are all filled with light in everyone's yards, right? Everything's about light at the celebration of Christmas. And this celebration of light in the darkest moment of the year is because the light has begun to triumph. The light has begun to turn back the darkness. And this is the time the church celebrates the birth of Christ, because that's what Christ does. Christ comes into the world in a hidden, secret way. But the victory that Christ brings over sin and death has begun. The darkness of the world has begun to be pushed back. We have this beautiful reading today from St. Paul, and he says, "Brothers and sisters, you know the time. It is now the hour for you to wake from sleep. For our salvation is nearer now than when we first believed. The night is far spent. The day draws near. Let us cast off deeds of darkness and put on the armor of light." That is the time that we are now celebrating. And in this celebration of the Lord's birth, of his coming to triumph over the darkness, we take up all of these elements from our pre-Christian ancestors. And especially in Europe, as Christianity made its first debut, if you will, in Europe, we take up these symbols. We have this wreath here, which symbolizes the wheel of time. The Yule wheel was this circle that symbolized the seasons would continue. And it's a symbol of hope because the circle's not broken. The seasons will turn. The darkness won't win. Spring and summer will come back. And it's made of evergreen branches, because the evergreen tree in northern Europe is a symbol of life. It's a promise of hope. That in the midst of all of this death and darkness, this tree remains verdant. And so we take that symbolism, which becomes the Christmas tree, it becomes the Christmas wreath, and we put on it these lights, candles, lights shining in the darkness to symbolize that light of hope, that little light that's Christ coming into the world. The beginning of this conquest. All of these symbols, they're symbols of hope. But what is hope? We hear that word bandied about. What does it mean? What is the virtue of hope? The virtue of hope is trust, expectation, confidence in things that we cannot yet see. in a future that we know is coming, that we trust is coming, that we believe is coming, even if it's not here yet. And it's hope that gives us the strength to get through this darkness. In this darkest moment of the year, hope shines forth. And in many ways in our lives, we experience this darkness. Not so much the physical darkness our ancestors experienced because we have fluorescent lights that we can just switch on. But we live in a world of spiritual darkness, a world in which many people struggle with meaninglessness, with despair, with discouragement. We are in desperate need of the hope of Christ as we feel overwhelmed by that darkness. So this Advent is a time of hope. It's a time to remember that Christ is coming into the world and that his coming is meant to drive out the darkness. And as we celebrate this time of Advent, these 4 weeks of preparation, we can join in Christ's work. We can participate in that hope. Christ came to drive out the darkness, and we also can drive out the darkness a little bit in our own lives. We also can light small candles of hope to shine out to those around us. And we can make this very concrete. Lent is that time when people always say, what are you giving up for Lent? Oh, it's fair to say, what are you giving up for Advent? Because it's a shortened version of Lent. It's a time to prepare ourselves for Christmas, just like Lent's a time to prepare ourselves for Easter. But rather than giving something up, why don't we think about it in terms of darkness and light as the scriptures offer us today? What are you going to do this Lent to drive out the darkness at least a little bit? Where's the darkness coming from in your life? Is it coming from screens, maybe? Your phone? Maybe toxic relationships, people that are really dragging you down? What is one thing that I'm going to do this Lent to say no to the darkness? Not no to people. We don't want to cut people off. And not no to good things. There's good things in technology, but no to the darkness. Christ is inviting us to think of one area during this time of Advent when we will push back on the darkness. One area where we can stop some of that darkness coming into our life. And one area where we can let the light of Christ shine forth. Whether that's by helping those in need, participating in those social projects we have at this time. With those posters outside for Hallow, there are these great apps, resources, something we can do. I'm going to do this prayer. I'm going to do this devotion. I'm going to listen to this inspirational podcast. I'm going to do something to let the light of Christ into my life. So that this Lent, I too can cast off deeds of darkness. And in my own small way, in preparation for Christ's coming, put on the armor of light.
Thank you again for listening to this episode of the Father Bills Podcast, and a big thank you to Father Dominic Sternhagen for his homily. Folks, going forward, I'm going to be kind of experimenting with some of the music that I've been using, kind of variations off the theme that you've heard from the beginning, and we'll just see. Eventually I'll land on something and it'll stay kind of steady. If you have any questions or comments, just go to my website, fatherbill.org, and there you can email me directly from the website. Take a look at the other things that are going on, the actual pages that I have, from liturgy to photos to a blog to other podcasts. In the meantime, may God bless you and have a great week. Bye-bye.